March 27, 1999. Dark clouds swallow the skies over Serbia as rain falls over the countryside. Somewhere above the storm, a black silhouette slices through the night. The F-117 Nighthawk, America's invisible jet. Inside, Lieutenant Colonel Daryl Zelko checks his instruments, his heartbeat calm and steady. His mission is to strike the Serbian Air Force Command Center in Belgrade, the heart of enemy coordination. A mission he has done many times before. Nothing unusual, nothing that should go wrong. His escorts, a group of F-16 Vipers, suddenly receive an order. Due to worsening weather conditions, all support aircraft must return to base. Zelko hears the command. For a moment there is silence in the cockpit. He is alone now. One man, one machine, deep inside enemy airspace. But he is confident. His aircraft is the most advanced stealth bomber ever built. On radar, it appears no bigger than a tennis ball. To the enemy, he is a ghost. No one has ever shot one down. And tonight, he doesn't expect that to change. As he flies into the storm, lightning flickers around the black shape of his jet. The mission begins. If you love true untold war stories like this one, make sure to like and subscribe. Every story here reveals a twist of fate you've never heard before. The F-117 Nighthawk was unlike any aircraft that had ever flown. Its sharp, angular design defied the laws of aerodynamics, built not for beauty but for invisibility. Radar waves didn't bounce off its surface. They scattered, vanished, leaving the aircraft nearly undetectable. To most, it was a myth, a phantom that appeared only in rumors. As Zelko guided the jet through the darkness, he trusted in that invisibility. The rain hammered against the fuselage, wind cutting across his path. But his instruments showed everything was stable. He was a shadow within shadows, gliding over enemy territory unseen. Below him lay the quiet countryside of Serbia, unaware that a $20 million machine was passing silently above their heads. In the cockpit, every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. Zelko's training taught him that in stealth missions, silence is survival. Even the smallest error, a wrong angle, a sudden flash, could mean detection. But tonight, his confidence was unshakable. The Nighthawk had flown countless missions without a scratch. No radar had ever locked onto one. No missile had ever come close. Lightning illuminated the clouds for a split second, revealing the ghost in the storm before darkness swallowed it again. Inside, Zelko pressed on toward his target, unaware that on the ground someone was already preparing to challenge the myth. The storm thickened as Zelko approached the Serbian border. Thunder rolled beneath him like distant artillery. The only light in the sky came from flashes of lightning and the soft glow of his cockpit instruments. Every few seconds he glanced at the radar screen. Empty. No threats, no signals, just the hum of the engine and the whisper of rain. Down below, darkness stretched endlessly. No cities, no headlights, just black fields and silent villages hiding beneath the clouds. He felt the weight of solitude pressing against him. Without his escort, there was no one to cover his back, no friendly call signs on the radio. Only static and the endless sound of wind. He adjusted altitude, dropping lower to avoid detection. The F-117 sliced through the mist like a blade. The stealth coating absorbed radar signals, making the aircraft almost impossible to track. Almost. Zelko knew that almost was the word that could kill a pilot. He reminded himself of the mission: reach Belgrade, release the bombs, and vanish before anyone knew he was there. That was the plan. That was what he was trained to do. Still, a quiet unease began to grow in the back of his mind. The same feeling soldiers get before something goes wrong. He couldn't explain why. But tonight the sky felt heavier. It was as if the darkness itself was watching him. Far below the storm, in the outskirts of Belgrade, another man watched the same sky. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Zoltan Dani, commander of a Serbian missile battery. For days he had waited for this moment, the chance to strike the invisible enemy that haunted his country's skies. His men were cold, tired, and soaked in rain, but their discipline never wavered. Inside the cramped command post, green light from radar screens flickered across tense faces. They had been briefed that NATO aircraft were flying overhead again, bombing key positions across Serbia. But tonight felt different. Dani sensed it. Somewhere above the clouds, one of those ghost planes was coming their way. He ordered his crew to activate the early warning radar, an old Soviet-built P-18, outdated, slow, and considered useless against stealth technology. Yet Danny believed otherwise. He had spent weeks studying how radar waves interacted with weather patterns. Maybe, just maybe, the low-frequency signals from the P-18 could catch what modern radars could not. The screen came alive with a storm of interference. Dots, flashes, false echoes. Rain and lightning confused the signal. Most would have dismissed it, but Danny leaned closer, eyes narrowed. Amid the noise, he noticed something. A faint moving blip, steady and deliberate. He tapped the screen. "There," he said quietly. "That's not weather. That's him." Outside, his men looked to the sky, unaware that in the darkness above, the ghost was already closing in. Danny's command post came alive with urgency. Technicians shouted coordinates, operators fine-tuned the radar, and spotters stepped out into the rain with binoculars, scanning the black sky. Everyone knew what was at stake. No one had ever managed to hit a stealth jet. If they succeeded tonight, it would echo across the world. The radar crackled with static. The P-18 was never meant for precision. It was a relic from another era. But tonight, it was their only hope. Danny's voice cut through the noise, calm, sharp, commanding. "Sweep the sky again. Focus between sectors 8 and 9. Another faint signal appeared, blinking for only a second before vanishing. The men hesitated, unsure if it was real. Danny didn't blink. "He's there," he said. "He's trying to disappear, but we've got him." While his team worked, Danny gave the order to prepare the missile battery. Each launcher towered like a silent giant against the lightning flashes. Soldiers rushed to arm the SA-3 missiles, weapons designed decades earlier, meant to fight old enemies, not ghosts from the future. Minutes passed like hours. Then, for a brief instant, the radar blip returned, stronger than before. A narrow grin crossed Danny's face. "Lock it. He's coming right for us." Up in the storm, Zelko's F-117 cut through the night, unaware that down below, a man with an outdated radar had just seen the invisible. The P-18 radar wasn't supposed to find anything that modern. NATO's stealth aircraft had flown hundreds of missions over Serbia without a single loss. The Americans were sure their technology made them untouchable. But Danny refused to accept that. He trusted not just the machine, but his instinct. He knew the radar waves at low frequency could sometimes slip between layers of air and bounce differently off stealth materials. It was unpredictable, unreliable, but it was something. And tonight, it was working. The storm that blinded other systems was giving him a strange advantage. The lightning, the rain, the thick clouds, all of it blurred the sky, hiding the F-117 from the world, but paradoxically revealing it to him. Inside the small bunker, Danny's crew leaned over their instruments, hearts pounding. "It's faint, sir," one of them said. "It could be interference." Danny's answer was firm. "No, that's a pilot who thinks he's invisible." He ordered the target radar online, the system needed for missile lock. Its range was limited, and activating it risked revealing their position to NATO aircraft. But Danny didn't hesitate. "Turn it on. We only need 20 seconds." The radar beam swept the sky. Nothing. Just static. "No contact," said the operator. Danny clenched his jaw. He knew they had one chance before the Americans detected them. He whispered, "Again! Try again!" For a moment, the screens were silent. Then a small signal flickered, right in front of them. The ghost was there. Danny took a deep breath. "Get ready to fire." High above, Zelko's F-117 glided through the rain, invisible to the world. He was approaching his target zone, the Serbian Air Force Command Center in Belgrade. The mission was nearly complete. He armed his payload and opened the bomb bay doors. That single action, that mechanical movement of metal panels sliding open, changed everything. The stealth design of the F-117 depended on perfect geometry, smooth angles, invisible edges. When the bomb bay opened, the shape broke. The radar cross-section grew larger. For the first time that night, the invisible jet became visible. Down below, Danny's radar suddenly lit up. "There, I see it!" he shouted. The operators leaned forward as the faint blip turned solid. The impossible was happening. "Phi-2 tracking the target," one yelled. "Phi-1 tracking," another confirmed. Danny's heart pounded, but his voice stayed steady. "Lock confirmed. Fire." The ground shook as two missiles erupted from their launchers, splitting the sky with a roar that rolled across the fields. Each missile streaked upward, trailing fire through the clouds. The men followed their path, holding their breath. In the cockpit, Zelko's instruments screamed with alarms. a high-pitched tone. Missile lock. He looked down and saw two bright tails rising through the storm toward him. He pulled hard on the controls, trying to climb, to turn, to vanish again into the storm. The stealth jet was fast, but not fast enough. For the first time, the hunter had become the hunted. The first missile sliced through the darkness like a burning spear, its engine screaming as it closed in on the Nighthawk's heat signature. Željko's pulse surged. He pushed the throttle to maximum and yanked the aircraft into a steep climb. The G-forces slammed him into his seat, the world spinning as the black jet fought against the wind and gravity. The radar warning in his cockpit blared again. The second missile had locked on. The storm flashed white with lightning, revealing two fiery trails chasing his shadow through the sky. The F-117 had no flares, no countermeasures. Its only defense was to remain unseen, but that advantage was gone. Now it was pure instinct and skill. The first missile passed by, missing him by meters. The shockwave rocked the aircraft, and for a moment, Željko thought he had escaped. Then came the second. A violent flash filled his cockpit. The explosion tore through the left wing, sending shards of metal and flame across the night sky. The stealth coating peeled away, and the once silent ghost was now a blazing torch falling from the heavens. The jet rolled violently. Alarms screamed, lights flickered, and the control stick kicked back against his hands. The Nighthawk was dying. Smoke filled the cockpit, and heat radiated through his gloves. His training screamed one command: eject. But at 6 kilometers high, with the jet spinning and the sky burning around him, it might be suicide. He hesitated for a heartbeat, feeling the crushing force of 7 Gs. Then, with every muscle straining, he reached for the ejection handles and pulled. The cockpit canopy blasted away with a violent crack, and in the next instant, Željko was thrown into the freezing night air. The force ripped the breath from his lungs as the seat shot upward, spinning through smoke and debris. For a heartbeat he felt weightless, then gravity seized him again, pulling him down through the chaos. Below, the F-117 was no longer a ghost. It was a burning storm of metal, spiraling toward the earth in a dance of destruction. Flames lit the clouds orange and red, flickering like lightning as pieces of the once invisible aircraft scattered across the sky. Željko's parachute opened suddenly with a sharp jerk that nearly dislocated his shoulders. Silence followed, the thunder, the roar, the alarms, all gone. Only the whisper of rain against the fabric above him. For a moment it felt unreal. He had survived the unthinkable. But then, the realization struck him like a bullet. He was descending straight into enemy territory. He looked up. His heart sank. The parachute was bright orange, visible from miles away. In the darkness, it was like a beacon calling everyone below to look up. He could already imagine searchlights cutting across the fields, soldiers shouting, dogs barking. He whispered to himself, half in disbelief, half in prayer. Not like this. Come on, not like this. Far below, the glowing wreckage of his aircraft hit the ground, sending a shockwave across the hills. The stealth fighter, once untouchable, was gone. The impossible had just happened, and now the most dangerous part of the mission was about to begin: staying alive. The wind roared past him as he tumbled through the sky. The explosion had disoriented him, the world spinning in flashes of orange and black. He could smell the burning metal from his jet, feel the freezing air biting into his skin. His body screamed from the G-forces, but adrenaline kept him conscious. The parachute fully opened, jerking him violently upright. He dangled beneath the canopy, drifting through a curtain of rain. Far below, the landscape of enemy territory stretched out like a black ocean of fields and forests. The silence was haunting, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and the faint crackle of burning wreckage. Željko looked around, trying to get his bearings. He could see flashes of headlights on roads miles away, moving toward the crash site. He had no illusions about what awaited him if they found him first. The Serbian forces would be searching within minutes. As he descended lower, he spotted a ditch cutting through a muddy field. That would be his landing point. He angled his parachute toward it, hitting the ground hard and rolling into the wet earth. Pain shot through his legs, but he forced himself up, unstrapped the chute, and buried it beneath the mud. The bright orange fabric disappeared under the rain-soaked soil. For the first time since the explosion, he stood still. No radio chatter, no engines, only darkness. Alone, behind enemy lines, he whispered to himself the only words that mattered. Stay alive. Just stay alive. Željko crouched low in the mud, his flight suit soaked, his hands trembling from cold and exhaustion. The smell of burned fuel drifted across the fields. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. They had seen the explosion. They were coming. He crawled toward a narrow ditch filled with dirty water and slid inside, pressing his body against the earth. The rain kept falling, masking his movements and muffling sounds. It was miserable, but it was life-saving. Every drop that hit the ground made it harder for the enemy to hear him breathe. Minutes passed, then headlights appeared on a nearby road. Trucks, voices shouted in Serbian, soldiers with flashlights fanned out into the fields, their beams slicing through the darkness. Željko froze. Every muscle in his body went rigid. One wrong breath, one movement, and it would be over. He could hear dogs barking in the distance, the search tightening around him. Slowly, he reached into his vest and pulled out his survival radio. He had to make contact, but not yet. If he transmitted too soon, the signal could be traced. For now, he had to wait. The ground vibrated as vehicles moved closer. He pressed himself deeper into the mud, feeling the cold seep into his bones. He whispered a silent prayer, not for victory or revenge, only for a few more minutes to stay unseen. Above him, the rain continued to fall, washing away his tracks. The ghost of the sky had become a ghost on the ground. The night had turned into a hunt. Soldiers spread across the countryside, flashlights sweeping through the fields, their boots splashing through puddles. Trucks rumbled down muddy roads while officers shouted orders in sharp bursts of Serbian. Word of the downed American jet had already spread through nearby villages. Civilians had joined the search, some out of curiosity, others for glory. Everyone wanted to be the one who found the invisible pilot. Željko could hear them. Every sound was amplified by the rain. A voice, a dog barking, the clank of a rifle. He held his breath, barely daring to move. The ditch he hid in was narrow and shallow, offering little cover, but it was all he had. The mud caked his face, blending him into the ground. Then came a new sound, low and heavy breathing, followed by the soft steps of paws. A dog. The noise grew closer, followed by a man's voice calling commands. Željko's pulse quickened. He reached for the knife strapped to his leg. If the animal found him, he would have only seconds to decide. The breathing came closer. He could hear the sniffing, the huffing of the dog's nose just beyond the edge of the ditch. His hand tightened on the handle. One motion, one strike, and he could silence it. But the man would hear. The dog froze. For a moment it stood there, listening. Then, as if distracted by another scent, it turned and trotted away into the rain. The footsteps faded. Željko exhaled slowly, shaking, his muscles burning from tension. He had escaped discovery, for now. But the net around him was closing, and dawn was only hours away. The night dragged on endlessly. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the air still carried the sound of men searching, shouting, and dogs barking. Željko lay motionless in the ditch, shivering from the cold. Every part of his body ached, yet he dared not move. The memory of the dog lingered in his mind. He could still see its shadow, hear its breath. Instinct had screamed for him to kill, to survive at any cost. But something deeper held him back, the quiet voice of reason that reminded him that killing the dog would only bring the soldiers running. The moment he spared it, he also spared himself. In that silence, he thought about his mother back home, about how she had always told him that sometimes mercy is the sharpest weapon. Now, hiding in enemy soil, those words had saved his life. He took a slow breath, calming his nerves, and looked up at the faint glow of the clouds above. The rain had stopped. The storm was clearing. Somewhere out there, the wreck of his jet was being surrounded by soldiers, scavengers, and flashes of cameras. The invisible plane was no longer invisible, and soon they would be looking for the man who flew it. He reached again for his radio, holding it in his muddy hands. It was his only link to the world that could save him, but also the one thing that could betray his position. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the transmit button. If he spoke too soon, they would find him. If he waited too long, his chance at rescue might vanish forever. He whispered under his breath, as if answering his own doubt. Wait for the right moment. Just a little longer. The hours crawled by. The searchlights moved farther away, fading into the night. But Željko knew they would return. His body was numb from the cold, his uniform heavy with mud. Every minute in the open was a gamble. He had to reach someone, now. He lifted the small survival radio, shielding it beneath his jacket to keep the sound from escaping. Static filled his ears. He adjusted the frequency, his fingers shaking. Then he spoke softly but firmly into the mic. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Vega 31 down. Vega 31 down. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then a crackle. A voice came through the static, faint but clear. Vega 31, this is Magic. We copy your mayday. What's your position? Relief washed over him. He wasn't alone. He tried to respond, but his voice broke with exhaustion. Last known position, after the target, southeast of Belgrade. The radio hissed again. Copy that, Vega 31. Stay low, we're coming for you. He lowered the device and pressed his forehead against the wet ground, breathing heavily. Somewhere, help was on the way. But rescue would be dangerous. Helicopters would have to cross hostile airspace, and one wrong move could bring enemy fire. In the distance, Željko heard the faint rumble of engines. Not trucks, not tanks, but the deep rhythmic pulse of rotor blades. A helicopter. His heart pounded. He checked his surroundings, eyes scanning for movement. He needed to mark his position, but his infrared strobe wasn't working. That left him one desperate option. He reached for a flare. Lighting it would expose him to both friend and foe, but if he didn't, they'd never find him in time. He took a deep breath, struck the flare, and brilliant red light flooded the field. For a moment he saw everything. The grass, the trees, the smoke, illuminated in fire. Then, from across the night, came a shout in Serbian. There! Over there! The flare burned like a beacon in the dark, casting long shadows across the field. Željko held it high, hoping the helicopter could see him before the soldiers did. The red glow reflected off the mud on his face, his eyes fixed on the sky. Then a deafening rush of wind filled the air as a U.S. Air Force search and rescue helicopter appeared over the treetops, its rotors thundering through the rain. The radio came alive again. Vega 31, this is Sandy 1. Can you hear us? Željko grabbed the device, shouting into it with everything he had left. I'm here! I'm alive! You're right above me! But the flare's brightness was blinding the crew's night vision equipment. Kill the flare! The pilot yelled through the static. You're lighting up the whole field! Željko dropped it instantly, pushing it deep into the mud until the flame vanished. The night swallowed him again. Then, through the fading smoke, he saw the helicopter's searchlight sweep across the field and stop, right on him. Two rescue men descended on ropes, landing only a few meters away. One ran toward him, shouting over the rotor noise. Sir, are you hurt? Željko, covered in mud and barely able to stand, gave a weak grin. Just cold. Let's get out of here. They hooked him to the harness, and within seconds he was lifted off the ground, spinning slightly as the helicopter pulled him into the air. Below, headlights appeared, enemy patrols racing toward the sound. Bullets cracked through the night, but the helicopter banked hard and climbed, vanishing into the clouds before the soldiers could reach them. Inside the aircraft, Željko collapsed into a seat, breathing in disbelief. One of the rescuers patted his shoulder. Welcome back, sir. You're safe now. For the first time that night, Željko smiled. Tell my mom I'm okay, he said, half laughing, half shaking. The helicopter disappeared into the darkness, carrying with it the man who had just survived the impossible. While Željko was being flown to safety miles away, Lieutenant Colonel Zoltan Dani stood before a crowd of cheering soldiers. The wreckage of the once invisible jet burned in the distance, lighting the night with an eerie orange glow. The men around him shouted in triumph, some unable to believe what they had just done. They had brought down a stealth fighter, something every expert in the world said was impossible. Danny didn't celebrate loudly. He watched the burning remains through the rain, his hands clasped behind his back. For months, he and his crew had studied, waited, and hoped for a moment like this. Now that it had come, he felt not pride, but a strange calm. He knew this night would echo through history. He gave simple orders to his men. Secure the area, gather everything you can. The Americans will want their ghost back. Trucks moved in, soldiers collecting twisted metal and shards of carbon fiber. One piece still bore the white letters, U.S. Air Force. As dawn broke over the Serbian countryside, Danny walked closer to the wreck. The aircraft was unrecognizable, just fragments of what had once been the most advanced jet in the world. He crouched and picked up a small panel, blackened by fire, the stealth coating still smooth beneath the soot. One of his men turned to him. Sir, how does it feel? Danny looked at the wreckage for a long moment before answering. It feels, he said quietly, like scoring the winning goal in the World Cup. He didn't know it yet, but that single act would make him a legend. the only man in history to shoot down a stealth fighter in combat. As the sun rose over Belgrade, news of the downed stealth fighter spread like wildfire. Serbian radio stations broke into their broadcasts with a single message that filled the airwaves. "We got one!" Across the country, people celebrated. For a nation under constant bombardment, the destruction of the American Ghost was more than a victory. It was proof that even the invisible could fall. The wreckage was transported to a military base, then to the Museum of Aviation in Belgrade, where pieces of the F-117 would later be displayed for the world to see. Bent panels, torn wings, and fragments of radar-absorbing material were arranged like trophies, symbols of resistance, intelligence, and national pride. Military analysts around the globe were stunned. If an old Soviet radar and decades-old missiles could bring down the most advanced stealth jet on Earth, what did that mean for the future of air warfare? Newspapers in Europe and the United States ran the story for weeks. Engineers studied what went wrong, politicians demanded answers, and the myth of invincibility around stealth technology cracked forever. For the US Air Force, it was a painful lesson, not about failure but about overconfidence. Technology alone could not guarantee safety. Human instinct, discipline, and timing had beaten machines designed to be untouchable. In the aftermath, Zelko's fellow pilots spoke his name with respect. They knew he had survived what no one else could have. And they knew that somewhere, on the other side of the world, a commander had earned his own kind of immortality. The invisible jet had fallen, but its story had just begun. More than a decade passed. The war was long over. The skies above Serbia were quiet again, and both men who had faced each other that night had returned to their lives. Daryl Zelko had retired from the Air Force, while Zoltan Dani had left the military to open a small bakery in his hometown. The world had moved on, but their story had not been forgotten. Zelko often spoke about that night in interviews, never with bitterness or anger. He spoke with admiration, not for the missile that nearly killed him, but for the man who had fired it. He understood what it meant to face an enemy doing his duty, just as he had done his own. Over time, he began to wonder what it would be like to meet him, the man who had seen him through a radar screen and changed both their lives forever. In 2011, that meeting finally happened. A television documentary brought them together on Serbian soil. When Zelko stepped out of the car and saw Dani waiting, he smiled. The two men approached each other slowly, then shook hands. There was no hatred in their eyes, only respect. Two soldiers who had once fought on opposite sides of a war now stood as equals, bound by a single night that neither would ever forget. Dani offered him bread from his bakery, and they laughed together like old friends. Zelko later said it was one of the most human moments of his life. "We were enemies for 8 seconds," he said, "and friends for the rest of our days." What began as a story of destruction ended as a story of forgiveness, proof that even after war, humanity can still rise above the ashes. The fall of the F-117 Nighthawk on that stormy night in 1999 marked a turning point in modern military history. For decades, stealth technology had been the symbol of ultimate superiority, the invisible hand that ruled the skies. But with one lucky radar ping and 2 missiles from an old Soviet system, that illusion shattered. Military strategists and engineers around the world studied the event in disbelief. How could a weapon designed to defeat radar be exposed by outdated equipment and human intuition? The answer lay not in technology, but in adaptability. Zoltan Dani and his crew had used creativity, patience, and deep understanding of their tools to exploit a weakness no machine could predict. For the United States, it was a reminder that even the most advanced systems have limits. The incident reshaped how future aircraft were designed, leading to improved stealth materials, better countermeasures, and new doctrines of air warfare. But the story of that night was about more than machines. It was about people. Daryl Zelko's survival became a testament to human endurance, the ability to stay calm in chaos, to hold on to hope when everything collapses. Zoltan Dani's success became a symbol of ingenuity and persistence against impossible odds. Together, their actions proved that war, at its core, is fought not just with weapons, but with willpower, courage, and instinct. The wreckage of the Nighthawk still rests in the museum in Belgrade, silent and blackened, a reminder to every visitor that no one is truly invisible, not in war, not in life. The story of Daryl Zelko and Zoltan Dani is more than a tale of war. It's a story about fate, courage, and the unexpected humanity that can rise from the darkest moments. Two men, separated by sides, united by destiny, one flying through the storm, the other waiting beneath it. Both changed by a single moment when the invisible became visible. In that night of fire and thunder, technology met instinct, arrogance met patience, and destruction gave birth to understanding. The wreck of the F-117 may have fallen from the sky, but from its ashes came something greater, respect between enemies, and a lesson for generations to come. Every war leaves scars, but it also leaves stories that remind us what it means to be human. Stories that show that bravery isn't about defeating others, but about surviving, learning, and forgiving. If this true story moved you, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Because every week, new stories like this one reveal the twists of fate that shaped our world. Moments when history turned in a heartbeat and humanity shone through the smoke. Sometimes the most powerful victories are not those won in battle, but those won in the heart.